Okay, so let's be real for a sec. Speaking English, especially when you're not 100% comfortable, can be like walking a tightrope.
Yeah.
Like all eyes are on you,
Yeah.
judging every word, every slip up.
Right.
Well, you're not alone in that feeling at all.
Right.
You've sent us a bunch of really interesting material about dealing with these English-speaking jitters, and I'm kind of nervous just thinking about all the stuff I need to work on myself.
Well, what's interesting is the sources really emphasize one thing, and it's that this fear is way more common than you might think. It's not just you, it's practically universal, even for people who've been speaking English for years.
It is a bit of a relief, actually. I guess just knowing that everyone stumbles a little makes me feel a little less like I'm the only one with stage fright.
Right.
But why is it so common, you think?
Yeah, the sources dive into that, and it's a mix of things. Obviously, there's the fear of making mistakes or sounding silly, being judged. It's natural to want to be seen as competent, right? But sometimes that desire can totally backfire and make us freeze up.
Oh, tell me about it. I've definitely had those moments where I know what I want to say, but the words just won't come out. It's like my brain short circuits.
Yeah, and that often comes down to a lack of practice. It's like any skill, if you don't use it regularly, you get rusty. The sources point out it's not just about knowing the grammar rules or having a massive vocabulary. It's about getting comfortable with the flow of the language, the rhythm, all those subtle things that make it sound natural.
So it's kind of like learning to dance. You can know all the steps, but if you don't practice, you'll trip over your own feet when the music starts.
Perfect analogy.
Right.
And then on top of that, we tend to pile on the pressure by aiming for perfection.
Yeah.
We want to sound exactly like a native speaker, which, let's face it, can be a pretty daunting goal when you're starting out.
Yeah, that's like trying to win a marathon when you've just started jogging. The sources mentioned something about reframing our mindset, though.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean?
So it's about shifting our focus from being perfect to simply communicating. Instead of obsessing over every little mistake, we need to remember that the goal is to get our message across to connect with the other person. It's like the difference between trying to perform a flawless piano piece and just jamming with friends. The goal is different, and so is the pressure.
That's such a good point. It's not about sounding like a textbook. It's about having an actual conversation.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, one thing that really resonated with me from the material is this idea of negative self-talk.
Yeah.
Those little voices in your head that whisper, you're going to mess this up, or they're going to think you're an idiot.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much power those thoughts can have.
Absolutely. It's a classic example of how our thoughts can directly affect our emotions and our behavior. Those negative thoughts trigger anxiety, which then makes us much more likely to stumble or freeze up. The sources suggest replacing those negative thoughts with positive affirmations, basically talking to yourself in a more encouraging way.
So instead of saying, I'm going to sound so stupid, you could say something like, I'm learning and getting better with every conversation.
Exactly.
Kind of like giving yourself a pep talk, right?
Exactly. It might seem a little cheesy at first, but trust me, it works. It's about retraining your brain to focus on the positive, on your progress, rather than your perceived shortcomings.
Okay, so we've laid out some of the reasons why speaking English can be so nerve-wracking. But how do we actually start tackling these nerves? The sources mention the importance of preparation and practice, but what does that actually look like?
Well, they offer some really practical advice here. One suggestion is to practice common phrases for everyday situations. Think about the things you say all the time, like introducing yourself, ordering food, asking for directions. Having those phrases ready to go can be a real confidence booster, especially when you're feeling a bit anxious. It's like having a script for those initial interactions.
Like having those cheat sheet notes hidden in your palm during a presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, but even with practice, I still get those sudden waves of panic, like right before a job interview or when I have to give a presentation.
Yeah.
My heart starts racing, palms get sweaty. It's awful.
Yeah, the source material calls that the fight or flight response. It's your body's natural reaction to stress, but it can definitely make speaking English feel like this high-pressure situation. They do have some interesting techniques for calming those nerves, though.
Okay, tell me everything, because honestly, those physical symptoms are the worst. It's like my body's betraying me.
Well, one technique they highlight is deep breathing, but not just any kind of deep breathing. They recommend a specific pattern: breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, and exhale for 4.
Huh. I've tried deep breathing before, but never with specific counts. What's so special about that?
It's about slowing down your heart rate and regulating your breathing. When you're anxious, you tend to take these short, shallow breaths, which only makes the anxiety worse. This technique helps to kind of break that cycle and bring a sense of calm.
Okay, I'm going to try that next time I'm feeling panicky. What about those other physical symptoms like sweaty palms and shaky hands? Is there anything I can do about those?
Well, believe it or not, your posture and facial expressions can actually make a difference. Standing tall, maintaining good posture, even smiling, can actually trick your brain into feeling more confident.
Really?
It's like you're projecting this image of self-assurance, even if you're a nervous wreck inside.
So it's kind of like fake it till you make it?
Exactly.
I can see how that might work.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look confident, maybe you'll start to feel more confident too.
Exactly. And it's not just about looking confident, it's about sounding confident too. They suggest speaking slowly and clearly pausing when needed to gather your thoughts.
See, that's something I struggle with. I tend to rush when I'm nervous, and then I end up stumbling over my words and just feeling even more flustered.
It's a common reaction. But remember, taking your time is perfectly acceptable. It shows that you're thoughtful and that you care about communicating clearly.
That's a good point. It's not a race. The sources also mention this idea of shifting the focus away from yourself. How does that help with nervousness?
Well, when we're nervous, we tend to become hyper-aware of ourselves, how we sound, how we look, what other people might be thinking of us. And that just creates this cycle of anxiety. Instead of dwelling on our own nervousness, they suggest actively engaging with the listener.
So it's about turning our attention outward instead of inward.
Yeah.
Like focusing on the other person and what they're saying.
Precisely. Listen attentively to what they're saying. Respond naturally. Ask questions to show that you're genuinely interested in the conversation.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If you're focused on the other person, you're less likely to be trapped in your own head obsessing over your, performance.
Exactly. Plus, asking questions has this double benefit.
Right.
It not only makes the other person feel valued, but it also takes the pressure off of you to be the constant center of attention.
It's like turning the spotlight around.
Yeah.
So we've talked about practice, deep breathing posture, focusing on the listener. It's a lot to remember. Any other tips for dealing with those in the moment? Jitters, those times when you suddenly feel that wave of panic wash over you?
Yeah, the source material has a few clever tricks for that. One of the simplest but surprisingly effective tips is to pause if you forget a word. Instead of panicking and getting flustered, take a moment to gather your thoughts.
Easier said than done. My mind always goes blank in those moments.
I know, it's tough. But you can use filler phrases like, let me think for a moment, or how can I best explain this to avoid those awkward silences?
Oh, those are good. I always feel so self-conscious about pausing, but those phrases make it sound totally natural.
Exactly. It's a way to acknowledge the pause without making it seem like a mistake. And honestly, most people won't even notice, especially if you're engaging them with eye contact and showing that you're thinking.
What about humor? Can that help with nervousness?
Absolutely. The sources is just using humor to kind of diffuse tension and make yourself feel more relaxed. If you make a mistake, just laugh it off. It shows that you're not taking yourself too seriously.
I love that I've always admired people who can laugh at themselves. It makes them seem so much more approachable and relatable.
Exactly. It breaks down barriers and creates a more relaxed atmosphere for everyone. And finally, they recommend something called visualization techniques.
Visualization. Is that like picturing yourself giving a flawless presentation, like you're some kind of English-speaking superhero?
It's similar, but it's more about imagining yourself having a successful and confident conversation before you even start speaking. It's a way of mentally preparing yourself for a positive outcome.
So it's like creating a mental movie where you're the star and you're nailing it.
Exactly. And the more detailed you can make this visualization, the more powerful it becomes. Imagine the setting, the people you're talking to, even how you feel in that moment of confidence.
Wow, it's like planting a seed of success in your mind. I'm definitely going to give this a try. But even with all this mental preparation, I still think practice is key, right?
Absolutely. Practice is essential, but the sources go beyond just general practice. They highlight a few specific types that are particularly helpful for overcoming nervousness.
Okay, tell me more. I'm always up for trying new techniques. What are they?
One technique is called shadowing.
Shadowing. I've never heard of that. What is it?
It involves listening to a recording of a native English speaker and trying to imitate their pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm as closely as possible.
So it's like you're their shadow, echoing their every word.
Precisely. It might feel a bit strange at first, but it's incredibly effective for improving your fluency and pronunciation.
But how does shadowing help with nervousness?
It trains your mouth and your brain to produce the sounds of English more naturally. The more you practice, the less you'll have to think about the mechanics of speaking and the more confident you'll feel.
That makes sense. It's like you're building muscle memory for speaking. Are there any other practice techniques you'd recommend?
Another one is recording yourself speaking English.
I hate listening to my own voice. It's always so cringy.
I know it can be tough at first, but trust me, it's one of the best ways to identify areas where you can improve.
Okay, I'm willing to try it, but what exactly should I be listening for?
Pay attention to your pronunciation, your grammar, your pace, your fluency. Notice where you hesitate, where you make mistakes, where you could sound more natural.
It's like being your own English coach, right? Identifying your weaknesses so you can work on them.
Exactly. The more you do it, the more comfortable you'll become with hearing yourself speak English, which, believe it or not, can actually boost your confidence.
That's interesting. It's like desensitizing yourself to that initial fear of hearing your own voice.
And here's a bonus tip that might surprise you. Don't be afraid to experiment with different accents.
Wait, really? I always thought the goal was to sound as close to a native speaker as possible.
That's a common misconception. While it's great to aim for clear and understandable pronunciation, you don't need to erase your own accent entirely.
So it's okay to embrace my own unique way of speaking English.
Absolutely. In fact, many people find that having a slight accent can be charming and endearing. It adds personality to your speech.
I love that. It's like adding your own personal flair to your English.
Now, we've talked a lot about individual strategies for overcoming nervousness, but there's another piece to this puzzle, the environment and the people you're speaking with.
You mean like where you are and who you're talking to can actually affect how nervous you feel?
Absolutely. The sources really emphasize the importance of surrounding yourself with supportive and encouraging people.
People who make you feel safe to make mistakes, right? Like a judgment-free zone.
Exactly. If you feel judged or pressured, it's only natural for your anxiety to increase.
So how do we create that kind of supportive environment?
Well, it starts with choosing your conversation partners wisely. Look for people who are patient, understanding, and encouraging.
So maybe not jumping into a debate about politics with a native English speaker right off the bat.
Probably not the best idea. Instead, seek out language partners who are also learning English or who have experience learning other languages. They'll be more likely to empathize with the challenges you're facing.
That's a great point. They've been there, they get it. The sources also mentioned something about online language communities. Are those helpful?
Incredibly helpful. They provide a space where you can connect with other learners from all over the world, share experiences, ask questions, and practice your speaking skills without feeling judged. It's like having a global network of cheerleaders in your corner.
That sounds amazing.
Right.
What about the physical environment? Can that affect how nervous you feel?
Absolutely. Have you ever noticed how you feel more relaxed and comfortable in certain spaces? Like you're more likely to open up and chat with someone in a cozy coffee shop than in a sterile office building.
Oh, totally. I'm a much better conversationalist when I'm surrounded by good vibes.
The same applies to speaking English. If you're feeling anxious, try to find a physical space where you feel comfortable and at ease.
So like create a little oasis of calm.
Exactly. It could be a quiet corner in your home, a park bench with a beautiful view, even your favorite coffee shop. The key is to find a space that reduces distractions and helps you relax.
I love that. It's all about setting yourself up for success. Now let's talk about something that I think a lot of English learners struggle with, the fear of forgetting words or making grammatical errors. I know I do.
It's a very common fear, but it's important to remember that everyone makes mistakes, even native English speakers.
Really? I always imagine them with this perfect vocabulary and grammar, always at their fingertips.
It might seem that way, but trust me, even native speakers have their brain fog moments where they forget words or make mistakes.
That's actually kind of reassuring. It's human to mess up even in your native language. But still, the fear of making those mistakes in English can be paralyzing. How do we overcome that?
It starts with accepting that mistakes are an inevitable part of the learning process. Instead of viewing them as failures, try to see them as opportunities for growth.
So embrace the imperfections.
Exactly. And remember, most of the time, people are more focused on understanding your message than on dissecting your grammar.
That makes me feel better. But what about those times when you just can't think of the right word? It's like my mind goes completely blank.
Don't panic. There are a few strategies you can use. One is called circumlocution, which basically means describing the word you're trying to remember.
So instead of saying I need a thingamajig, I could say I need a tool for, fixing things.
Exactly. It might sound a bit roundabout, but it gets your message across, and it buys you some time to think of the right word.
That's clever. Any other tips for those word loss moments?
You can also try using simpler synonyms or rephrasing the sentence. So instead of saying, I'm feeling apprehensive about this presentation, you could say, I'm a little nervous about this presentation. Don't be afraid to simplify.
That's a great reminder. I sometimes feel like I need to use the biggest, most impressive words to sound intelligent.
Clear and concise is always better than trying to impress with your vocabulary. And if all else fails, don't be afraid to ask for help.
You mean just admit I don't know the word and ask someone?
Exactly. It's not a sign of weakness. It shows that you're willing to learn. Plus, most people are happy to help.
Wow, this is all so helpful. I'm already starting to reframe how I think about making mistakes.
That's fantastic. And remember, the more you practice, the less likely you are to make those mistakes in the first place.
Practice makes progress, right? It's like anything, the more you do it, the better you get.
And the more comfortable you become with speaking English, the less nervous you'll feel. It's a positive feedback loop.
Okay, I'm feeling pumped to keep working on my English skills. What are your final thoughts for part 2 of this deep dive? Any parting words of wisdom?
Remember this, you are capable of so much more than you think. Keep learning, keep practicing, and never be afraid to make mistakes. Those oops moments are just stepping stones on the path to fluency.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've explored a ton of strategies and techniques for overcoming nervousness and embracing the joy of speaking English. Now it's up to you to take this knowledge and make it your own.
Experiment, practice, have fun, and never give up on your language learning journey.
Until next time, keep diving deep. Welcome back to our deep dive, on conquering nervousness when speaking English. It feels like we've already uncovered so many great tips and tricks in the first 2 parts.
We've explored the psychology behind, those jitters, tackled those practical strategies for managing them, and even delved into, creating that supportive environment.
But there's one area we haven't really explored yet that I'm excited to talk about: technology.
Yes.
I have a feeling it could be a really powerful ally, in our quest to become more confident English speakers.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. The sources point out some interesting ways technology can help. And I'm not just talking about, those basic translation apps.
Okay, spill the tea.
Yeah.
I'm ready to embrace my inner tech geek. Where do we start?
Well, maybe the most obvious place is with language learning apps and websites.
Right.
There's this whole universe of resources out there designed to help you improve your vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, even your conversational skills.
It's like having a virtual English tutor in your pocket, right?
Yeah.
But with so many options, how do you even know where to begin? It's overwhelming.
I hear you. The sources suggest thinking about your individual learning style and goals. Some apps are all about gamified learning, making it fun and engaging. Others offer personalized lessons tailored to your specific needs.
So it's like finding the right workout routine.
Yeah.
Some people love those high-intensity classes. Others prefer yoga.
Exactly.
It's all about what works for you. What are some of the things to look for in a language learning app?
I definitely recommend looking for apps that offer a variety of activities. Think interactive exercises, listening comprehension, even speaking practice with feedback on your progress. That way you can actually track your improvement and see where you need to focus.
That makes sense. It's like having a personal trainer for your English skills. Speaking of which, what about pronunciation? That's always been a bit of a struggle for me. Are there any tech tools that can help with that?
Absolutely. There are apps and websites that use speech recognition technology to analyze your pronunciation and give you feedback on how to improve. Some even show you visually how to form the sounds correctly.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like having a virtual speech therapist. That could be a game changer for people who struggle with specific sounds or accents. But what about like the ultimate challenge, actually speaking English in real life situations? Can technology help with that too?
Believe it or not, it can. Have you ever heard of virtual reality simulations for language learning?
Virtual reality, like those headsets that gamers use?
Exactly. They're creating these immersive environments where you can practice speaking English in these really realistic scenarios, like ordering food at a restaurant, giving a presentation, or even going on a job interview.
So it's like a safe space to practice those like nerve-wracking situations without the real-world consequences.
You got it. It's a brilliant way to build confidence and fluency before you actually face those situations in real life. And speaking of real-life connections, there's another tech tool we can't forget: online language communities.
Oh yeah, we talked about those earlier. What's so special about them?
Well, they offer an amazing way to connect with other English speakers around the world. There are countless platforms and groups dedicated to language exchange and practice. You can find partners who are learning English just like you, or native speakers who want to learn your language.
It's like a global network of language enthusiasts. What a fantastic way to practice your skills and make new friends from different cultures.
Exactly. It's a win-win. And with video chat and messaging, you can practice speaking and listening in this relaxed, supportive environment. But there is one important caveat to all of this.
Okay, I'm sensing a but coming. What is it?
Well, as amazing as technology is, it can't replace one crucial element, human connection.
Ah, yes, real-life, face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, language is at its core about communication, and communication thrives on that human connection. So while technology can be a fantastic supplement, it's important to also seek out opportunities to practice English with, real people.
I love that. It's a good reminder that language learning isn't just about memorizing words and grammar rules. It's about connecting with other human beings. And that's a beautiful thing.
It really is. And it brings a depth and richness to the experience that technology just can't fully replicate.
Well, it seems we've reached the end of our deep dive. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners who are still on that path to, conquering their English-speaking nerves?
Remember this. You are capable of so much more than you think. Keep learning, keep practicing, and never be afraid to make mistakes. Those oops moments are just stepping stones on the path to fluency.
I love that. I think that's the perfect note to end on. We've explored a ton of strategies and techniques, for overcoming nervousness and embracing the joy of speaking English. Now it's up to you to take this knowledge and make it your own.
Experiment, practice, have fun, and never give up on your language learning journey.
Until next time, keep diving deep.